Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Jobs4Football podcast. Today, we are joined by Danielle Prescott and Stuart Benthom, and we are here to discuss the groundbreaking UCFB Masters MSc in Scouting and Recruitment, a fantastic course which Jobs4Football are endorsing. Great. Firstly, guys, hello. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Nick, and thank you for obviously inviting us onto the platform.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. Firstly, I think probably the best thing is just to give a little brief kind of synopsis, a little introduction to yourselves, and that'll kind of set the tone for the podcast moving forward.
I don't mind going first. So I'm Danielle Prescott. My role at UCFB is Associate Dean for Postgraduate Study across Sports Coaching and Performance. I'm also going to be the course leader on this new programme from September. In terms of my background, I've traditionally worked in education for coming up for 20 years, higher education level across several different universities. And I've always kind of taught in areas around scouting, talent ID, performance analysis, etc. And alongside that, I've always worked in practice. So I've worked at numerous EFL clubs, starting out in performance analysis, and then kind of allowing that to move me into areas such as scouting and recruitment. And for me personally, as a career trajectory, it's not anything I ever thought about. But primarily that's because my education at university level, scouting and recruitment was never talked about. It was only performance analysis. And even then it was only just sort of taking off. But the skills that I learned as a performance analyst allowed me to transition quite easily into the scouting world. So moving into that world, I've worked for 7 years with Manchester United's academy at ages 12 to 21. And during that time, and where I currently am, is with the FA scouting for England ladies.
Fantastic. And I'm sure you had a plethora of players at Man United that you worked with previously. Can you kind of make any of those public?
Knowing how football clubs work, probably not. But I think one of the things, obviously, within the scouting world is that maybe as a frustration is that sometimes the players that you see don't come to fruition for quite a long time. Yeah. So there's obviously that element as well, where there's kids in the academy now, for example, that I've been very much part of that process, but haven't necessarily come to their full fruition yet.
Of course. No, fantastic. And Stuart, from your side?
From my point of view, I've worked mostly primarily in EFL clubs. Firstly, as a recruitment analyst, covering various aspects of the recruitment process, and then sort of transitioned into a change of title and responsibilities as a chief scout for the last 6 or 7 years. And I'm actually doing a bit of teaching now in terms of scouting and recruitment stuff on master's courses. So very much sort of providing opportunities for the next generation.
Fantastic. And probably you've worked a little bit different on the EFL side, Coventry, I think, Blackpool as well. So would you see that your kind of approach was maybe a little bit different to Danielle's, coming from the analysis side as well?
Certainly from a budgetary point of view, I would have expected so. I mean, Coventry, we actually sort of progressed from League Two up to the Championship, so much smaller departments, much more all-encompassing roles, rather than sort of very designated separate roles within the department, I would have thought. But yeah,
great.
Probably the same challenges. I don't think there's a great deal of difference, really. I think scouting and recruitment is largely facing the similar challenges regardless of the level.
Definitely. Great. Well, Daniel, listen, from my side, I know how groundbreaking this UCFB Masters course is. Basically, what has inspired yourself and UCFB to deliver this course?
A couple of things, really. And from an academic perspective, those couple of things are absolutely what we need to be able to justify why we've gone down this route. So the main thing is kind of sector need. So as someone who's worked in this sector and talking to scouts at various different clubs and at various different levels, there's always been kind of a message that there's never been any sort of formal education. So the reliance on education in this sector is either through private CPD providers. You've obviously got the FA courses that do talent ID. And then if obviously clubs themselves do in-house CPD. So that tends to be the line that's drawn in relation to people upskilling or kind of learning things that aren't necessarily, something that is natural to a lot of people in terms of what you need to understand to be in these roles. So there was that sector need. But then there's also an element of kind of interest that we're seeing within our own student body at UCFB. So within our other postgraduate programs, so that's football coaching and analysis and also performance analysis in football, students on the performance analysis program in particular get a module called talent ID and recruitment. And what we were seeing is that piqued their interest in an area that they've never necessarily been privy to before. And it reminded me very much of my experiences at undergraduate and master's level, where scouting was never talked about, recruitment was never talked about, performance analysis at that stage wasn't really talked about. It was just kind of dipped into coaching programs. So what we started to notice was that once they got a feel for what this is actually like and the sort of things that would be really useful to understand, they started to then venture into doing a bit of research in relation to, could this be a viable career? What exactly is it I would be doing? And how would I potentially look at finding future players in football? So there was kind of a student voice that was getting louder and louder through the very little bit of content they were getting embedded within a program that was nothing to do with scouting and recruitment. And my personal journey has definitely had an impact in kind of the creation of this, which was that I very much started in my undergrad and master's degree was in coaching. I got a bit of analysis exposure, which then made me want to move into that as a potential career. And then the analysis skills that you build allow you to transition that into roles of scouting and maybe further down the line move into recruitment-based roles. I've not necessarily reached that recruitment stage, which is obviously the main difference probably between myself and Stuart. But that's kind of what we're trying to embed within this new course, that we want people to obviously understand all the principles that are needed within scouting. But there's also a longer term plan, which is that you won't want to always stay in scouting. You might want to move into recruitment roles, which means that there's a different responsibility level there. So for us, there was kind of those two factors, sector needs and student voice that we've listened to, and an appetite for people that are studying subjects similar, but aren't exclusive to this.
And I think from my point of view, obviously knowing the ins and outs of the job industry within football, this area is really evolving in terms of roles, not just in the UK, but within Europe, globally now. As you know, we do a lot kind of in the Middle Eastern region, and they're starting now to not just cherry pick players. They're starting to put a real structure behind scouting, analysis, analytics, and putting a kind of recruitment structure in place. So yeah, makes complete sense in reference to what kind of UCFB are doing moving forward. So give us a little background more about the kind of modules and how would this course prepare students to take that step into the football industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of probably answer the first question, the latter question first, we do see a lot of students coming out of the courses we already have that, like I said, get an interest in scouting. We do get some opportunities from external providers in scouting that we promote to those students, and they end up absolutely flourishing. And Stuart's got kind of case studies of students he's been involved with at UCFB that have done that, but have not been on a scouting specific program. Yeah. So the course itself should enhance our opportunities of being able to really open the floodgates to opportunities that we've sometimes had to hold back because we don't want too many scouting opportunities for students aren't studying it. Yeah. Whereas now we've got that platform to be able to do it. So in terms of the modules, we've got a module called an interdisciplinary approach in football, which basically is about understanding the different relationships you develop with the different disciplines you would work with. So from a scouting capacity, what we would tend to do is bring in a coach that would then kind of understand how do they work with a scout, how do they work with heads of recruitment. We'd then do the same with people that work in physio, medical departments, sports science, and psychology. So we're bringing in all the different disciplines to understand how you are such an important cog in that whole mechanism. And that runs across our whole portfolio program. So every single discipline we touch upon will be relatable to scouts, to heads of recruitment, to analysts, to coaches, for example. We then move into a module called Applied Talent Detection, Identification and Selection. And the idea behind this is the understanding that in order to identify talent, you first off need to understand where you're looking for your talent. And one thing that I've found in my experiences is that you will often find future football, stars, if you will, that don't necessarily start off in football. They can start off in other sports. So it's about really kind of tapping into the talent pool, but it's about knowing where that talent pool is. Myself and Stuart had a conversation earlier about this a little bit, and we were talking about actually the societal impact in terms of narrowing the pool even more. So I listened to a talk last week about how phone addiction, social media addiction, for example, is actually removing the presence of kids just going out and playing, which from a talent perspective is that pool's just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So that will be kind of fed into that module, but we'll also look at things like relative age effect, biobanding, maturation. And a key thing for me on this course is also to get the gender balance right. So we also want to apply, how does this apply to female footballers, not just male footballers? And we'll talk about menstrual impacts, etc., with that as well. We've then got another module that's a little bit different for what we normally do at UCFB, but a hybrid module called Performance Analysis, Media and Communication. And the idea around this is that people won't necessarily want to stay within scouting for the longevity of the career, but they might want to move into recruitment. When you move into recruitment, there might be obviously the expectation that you'll be at the forefront of media. You'll have to do interviews. You'll have to justify maybe poor decisions you've made in recruitment. So this module is a bit of half media training. So what you should and shouldn't say and how you should say it and where you should and shouldn't say it. But then there's a context element, which is then the performance side of it. So how do you analyze performances? How do you utilize the tools like Huddle, NACSport, for example, and use GPS data, for example, to get the context in which you want to talk about? And how does that then portray in terms of what you would be saying in your messaging? Then we move into the recruitment side. So there's a module called Recruitment Strategies in Football. And this for me is where you're delving into the understanding of negotiation skills. How do you kind of understand international versus domestic markets? What are the challenges, for example, between male and female football? And what would that mean depending on where you land? So we're delving into more of the recruitment side on that module. Then we have the module called Football Statistics and Data Analysis, which brings in how do you utilize data for making recruitment decisions and identifying initial talent. So students will then have access to things like Y-Scout, and this is where they'll get exposure to things like Tableau, Python, SQL, etc. in terms of how do you kind of interpret that data and use it to inform your decisions with more of a justifiable underpinning. And then the final module is our applied research projects, which from a student perspective is very much like your traditional dissertation module. So you choose the research that is applicable to you, what you're more interested in, and you shape it based on what you want that to be. Probably to wrap that up, in terms of assessments across this program, there are 11 assessments across this master's program, which is, it sounds a lot, but it's not any different to any other master's level qualification. But there are 9 different modes of assessment. So there are traditional reports, traditional presentations, interactive presentations, Monday Night Football style presentations, podcast creation, case study reviews, creating your World 11 based on data. So we try and diversify in terms of assessments so that equally we can balance the strengths of different students that we might get on this course.
So it's a real holistic course then, in terms of encapsulating, listen, it's not just sit in a room and watch how Liverpool played on Sunday and kind of tear that to bits and bring out the best players. It's not about that. It's more kind of encapsulating when you walk out the door, you won't just be a scouting or recruitment expert. Potentially you'll be somebody who can go out and deliver interviews, engage with parents, engage with football clubs, and basically know how to present themselves as individuals.
Yeah, and I think we're really keen on making sure that we do exactly what it says on the tin. We're not just kind of following the scouting side of it. We're absolutely acknowledging the recruitment part. And I think one thing we're also keen on doing is making sure that from a career perspective, I always say to students when I talk about this course, people often think about scouting for international kind of selection or domestic clubs, but there's now avenues where people are being scouts for agencies and for brands. And
Correct.
you know, when I go out there, when I used to go out there for United and was talking to some scouts, I was obviously expecting them to tell me what club they were from, when actually they'd say, "Oh, I'm from Adidas, I'm from Puma, or I'm from such an agency."
Great point.
So it's not just scouting kind of at the traditional level that people would expect, but it's then developing the skill sets that actually open the different career avenues that are out there, but some people don't realise.
No, great point. And there was an advert actually yesterday from a well-known football agency that was actually recruiting, I think, a data analyst and also somebody within scouting and recruitment. So yeah, 100%. A big question that we always get with these courses or courses that we endorse is, okay, guys, but what's the real world exposure? It's great to have it in books. It's great to be in a seminar. This is probably where Stuart can give some insight as well. But how does that kind of interact? Do we get any opportunities to interact in real life football clubs, for example?
Yeah, I'll probably let Stuart answer this one, because he's probably a really great example of answering that question initially. If I need to feed in, then I obviously will.
The reason I know Danielle previously is because when I was at Coventry, we actually provided some work experience to UCFB master's students. Obviously, prior to the Scouting and Recruitment course was started, but I think the coaching analysis and then the performance analysis, we would go in and speak to students and then provide them with some opportunities as close to how they would operate if they were working for a club. Ask them to find players, ask them to watch leagues, ask them to present to us, create some sort of reporting, presenting and meeting scenarios that would be as close to how they would operate within a club. And from my perspective, it was actually a really good tool for recruiting scouts. Recruited 2 outstanding scouts that are actually working full time in the championship now. From that, and it afforded us an opportunity to spend time with them over a period of months, assess their growth and their potential. So it actually became a really good tool for me personally, to recruit people. But from their perspective, and even those that didn't progress with us, I'd like to think that it gave them an opportunity to get as near to a work experience as they could possibly get from an academic sort of setting.
Anything to add to that, Danielle, from your side?
Yeah, so we, off the back of this programme being advertised, we've had quite a few clubs actually reach out to us to say that they'd, welcome the opportunity to come in and speak to students from, I guess, a sharing insight perspective. But then that's led on to further conversations about kind of how we can formalise some of these agreements a little bit more. And one thing that we are noticing is that I had a conversation with a club probably about a month or 2 ago. I won't divulge the club, but they're a Premier League club. And I went in to chat with them, and one thing that stuck out to me was that they said that they actually struggle to recruit young qualified scouts, and it kind of fed into the whole culture of, nepotism. It is who you know rather than what you know, etc. And I think there's part of me that thinks, will we ever actually move away from that? But there's also a part of me that thinks that maybe there's a reason why we never did. And courses like this for me that kind of provide that next generation of people that are going in with a different level of, I guess, kind of knowledge based on, the way that things are evolving over time, might start to eventually change that. And off the back of that conversation, we started looking at things like introducing a bit of a scouting academy in partnership with UCFB and how that could work. And, they offered us to use the facilities, for example, to do some of these workshops. And I'm starting to see more and more of that coming forward. Now, obviously, we can't divulge who they are just in, because we're not at that stage. But one thing I would say from a UCFB perspective is that is definitely one of our key strengths, is that we make sure that, first off, the education is where it's expected to be in terms of level, but also that the opportunities that you get provided with as part of being a UCFB student it is absolutely critical to the level of study and the subject in which you're studying. A uniqueness that we have is we have a dedicated employability and career team at UCFB. And as someone who's worked in different universities, that's something that's quite rare. It usually always falls on the lecturer to connect students to contacts they have and work out all the logistics. And that still happens. So I still obviously reach out to my networks for students, but we also have a dedicated team that kind of look at that and look at obviously exposure to different opportunities for students. So this course for me means that we will be enhancing our offering of opportunities that we currently have. But as I said before, we've held back a little bit because we don't want a scouting imbalance on a program that's called performance analysis.
Yeah. Yep.
Whereas now we've got a course where we can actually just let rip on all those opportunities and actually showcase them. But one thing that I am mindful of is that we don't create a conflict for students. So I've had a conversation internally with our team at UCFB about opportunities in clubs, but also opportunities for agencies. And it wasn't until this conversation evolved that some people might be a little bit worried, because if you've got a student cohort and you've got some students that work for a club, some students that work for an agency in the same room, they potentially could be sharing information.
Yes.
That's why, in terms of the partnerships that we do develop, we're going to do it really carefully to make sure that everybody is aware of who's in that room, but equally what partnerships are on the table to avoid things like that going forward.
Perfect. Stuart, from your side, obviously being a chief scout, what are some of the challenges that you've had when recruiting scouts, whether that's a regional scout, whether that's somebody supporting and directly reporting into you? But what's some of the main challenges that you've had both at Coventry and at Blackpool?
Well, I think Danielle kind of alluded to it there a little bit, that traditionally we recruit people that we know or that we're aware of or that are recommended to us. And that's generally based on experience, track record, cultural fit, perhaps just people that see the game as you, that you get to meet on the circuit. There's definitely been a vacuum in terms of qualifications. So if you're talking about a large process of recruitment where you have open recruitment, likely to go through an HR department firstly now, so you want to stipulate some filters because you're going to get a large amount of people qualifying for a position. And if you're looking for academic qualifications, there aren't any really that were relevant that you could use as a filter. You could ask for, I don't know, maybe something, the most relevant thing is that somebody's got a performance analysis background, but that's likely to then exclude a lot of people that might have potential to become a scout. So that's really difficult. I think the qualification part is probably the biggest area of difficulty. And then it's just how you assess people, isn't it? I mean, setting people tasks. But as I mentioned earlier, that's why I really like the opportunity to go in and sort of speak to the next generation, because you're able to spend time with them and see how they adapt and see how they develop, which obviously isn't something that you're afforded with that sort of time when you're recruiting in a time limited situation.
And I think from our side, obviously, we recruit for a lot of roles across a spectrum of departments, from medical to physio to scouting and analysis to coaching, the business side and the marketing side. As soon as our office sees UCFB on the CV, we know we're going to have a really positive conversation with that candidate. And that's all credit to UCFB and the types of candidates that they are bringing through their institution. So yeah, I've got no doubt that this will be any different kind of moving forward. In terms of resources, Daniel, what kind of support or resources do the students have access to during the course and after the course?
So in terms of resources that can help them in terms of the practice, they have access to obviously industry standard technologies. So Huddle Sports Code, Y-Scout, Tableau, for example, NAC Sport, Catapult. Wow. We've also got a contract with InPlay, which is obviously a web-based analysis platform. So we're also looking at other sort of providers as well. So there's the German one, is it Impact, which is like the maybe like the rival to Y Scout, if you will. But we're looking obviously at different providers. But the key thing for us is that we want to make sure that whatever these students are going to be using when they get into the real world outside of education, it's not a surprise to them. They're fully versed in what it is that they need to do with these tools. And that's kind of I think that's our vision going forward every single year. And in my conversation with Stuart earlier, I made a comment about, always feeling like you're chasing your tail. And I think that's just the sector because it moves so quick. And, it's a lot of people think within teaching, once you've set your cycle for a year, you're just repeating the same thing every single year. But within this sector in particular, even in performance analysis, everything's evolving, everything's changing. There's something new, or somebody else is doing something different that is giving you that marginal gain, and you're trying to keep on top of that. So the resources that we provide, I would probably say they are the fundamental ones that I mentioned, but we're also always looking at what is next, what is coming up that actually we need to be on top of. And I think one thing we've probably thought about with the new module that encompasses the media element is that, it's not that we're looking for students that go into punditry careers, but actually further down the line, you might end up with some people that have ended up in, a very high profile position and they get a punditry opportunity. We want them to be able to be comfortable with the type of technologies that they'd be using. So that's why we introduce kind of the Monday Night Football style presentation, so that they know the technologies to be able to deliver information rather than just the information themselves.
And that's really important. Like I say, I think there's the age-old adage of the traditional scouting skills, the analytics. Where is the perfect scenario between the two? And so many people think, oh, I like old school, I like eyes on. So many people think, well, listen, I need to know what the average shot was in terms of that game, or those how far he ran, or the distance covered. There's so many different people's perception of what a good scout would be. And do you feel that you can't kind of pigeonhole that, and it's a mixture of the both, or kind of how do you feel that kind of balances between traditional scouting skills and the more analytical?
I think there's a place for both, and I think it's one of those questions that doesn't have a very definitive answer. And one thing we often talk about at UCFB in the courses that we teach is that scouting is subjective, and we'll never move away from that, because people go with things like, I can feel it in my gut, it's an instinct, I can feel that they're the type of player. And a lot of that is obviously based on the experiences of that person. But the place for things like data analysis or traditional performance analysis even is that allows an additional justification to the choices. So for me, when you're moving into roles that are maybe more catered towards recruitment rather than scouting, you're going to need those skills to be able to justify your decisions to the board and be able to say, you're putting your hand in your pocket for this player because of this, this, and this, and your justification is coming from that. So the tools are there to kind of, for me, as a bit of an aid and to supplement things. And, Stuart mentioned before about filtering processes for scouting candidates to work with him. There's obviously a filtering process for candidates of people that you want to get into your club as players. So without that would be really difficult. And especially for clubs, obviously, where the resources are nowhere near as high, they might rely on them as the sole recruitment, strategy to be able to find players that, typically would cost clubs a lot of money to go out and see across the world.
Yeah. And kind of all in all, how do you see this course basically building and shaping the future of football scouting? Obviously, Stuart made some great points in terms of the actual recruitment of scouts, but how do you see this course actually kind of developing and building the future scouts of tomorrow?
I think the key word is one that you touched on earlier, Nick, which was holistic. And I think that's something that we would probably use more and more as we talk about this course, because we are the first to mention scouting, and we are the first to kind of, I guess, break into this space with a let's do exactly what it says in the tin type degree. But for us, it's making sure that we cover all the bases. So we're not just focused on scouting. We're not just focused on people turning up at games and knowing what it is they're looking for, but we're thinking longer term. We're thinking, okay, what's the actual kind of inception of finding a talent, all the way through to securing that player at the very end. And I feel like that's the way in which this course has been built. So we're going through the whole process of a recruitment process, from scouts on the ground all the way through to the people that make decisions. And I think another key thing I would say about this course, and I've mentioned it briefly, is that we want the balance right between male and female football. So female football is obviously going through the motions of significantly evolving across the world. And we don't want to just kind of stay in the domain of the typical, let's just focus on male football, which a lot of courses do. And, you know, I've got no qualms about saying, you know, at one point or another, we were like that. So we want to obviously move with the times and make sure that we do cover people that are interested in going into football, regardless of gender.
Yeah.
And that this course obviously captures that, and that there's now avenues for scouts in female football. So you need to obviously know what you're looking for that is different to the men's game.
Definitely. And from your side, Stuart, in terms of this, knowing the modules that Danielle's mentioned, and obviously having an insight to UCFB, in terms of your future recruitment decision-making processes, if you're in a role, you would feel that this course, this Masters, would add huge value to that individual's profile.
Absolutely. I think the one thing that I would add to the holistic viewpoint of the module is that different people have different skill sets, and in a large department, even more so as we move into a greater take up of data, probably there are individual roles within the clubs, and each module will prepare people for those specific roles. Probably more importantly, from my perspective, is that the modern scout should really be able to understand all of it. You just asked Danielle a question a moment ago there about sort of traditional subjective and objective sort of viewpoints. I think we're at a point now where the modern scout should be able to understand, interpret, and combine the two approaches themselves. So I just think that the holistic thing is a bit of a buzzword, but I think it's very, very apt that you're actually preparing people really, really well for the workplace. I mean, if a CV landed on my desk and it said that they'd done this course, it would definitely grab my attention without question.
So, Daniel, in terms of timelines, in terms of how people sign up for this course, give us a little bit of background about kind of the term times, and the structure around that.
Yeah, of course. So the courses will start in September this year. So, we're in line with the traditional academic year. In terms of times for studying, so we offer the course both full-time and part-time. So if you wanted to do full-time, that would be across one year, which at master's level is an entire year, so September to the following September. If you wanted to do it part-time, it's just across 2 years. So you don't do any more or less modules, it's just spread out over a large period of time. If obviously you wanted to know a little bit more about the course that obviously goes outside the remit of this podcast, we do actually have a webinar that's running on the 9th of April, which I'm sure we'll be able to signpost people to if they wanted to join that. But if you look on the UCFB website for postgraduate webinars, it's definitely posted on there. So we'll just be talking more in depth about the course itself. Perfect. Which is then feeds us into any open days that we've got coming up, so where you can actually physically come onto campus and obviously meet with us, and we'd delve into this course, but we'd also delve into the other postgraduate courses that we have as well. So our campuses are based in Manchester and in Wembley. So there's then a choice for students to obviously based in the north or the south. I've obviously got a bias in terms of where I would pick, but it doesn't matter in terms of teaching team. So we're a team that travels across campuses. So the staff that you would have in Manchester is the same staff that you would have in Wembley as well. So there's no difference there in terms of the people that are at the front, obviously teaching you these subjects.
Perfect. And I think Darren put a link into the. If you could pop that link up again, Darren, that'd be much appreciated. Superb. So that is the link for the course moving forward. When did you say the webinar was, Danielle?
It's taking place on the evening of April 9th. Yeah.
Brilliant. So if anybody else wanted any more information regarding the course, regarding the tutors, anything in between, basically get yourselves on that webinar moving forward. Darren, I'm not sure whether there are any questions, are there? Okay, great. So, right, first question from Darren. Which modules are you most excited about?
For me personally, I'm really looking forward to the performance analysis, media and communication one, because I think it's really different than anything that we've done before. And when I talk to students about this module, so we've consulted our current students about this new course to get their take on it, and a lot of the messaging we get is, why didn't you do this sooner so that I could have picked it, which obviously is really good but not great for them. So this module in particular, obviously, like I said, it focuses on the hybridity of media, but also performance. But I really like the way we've gone with the assessments, which the first one is to create a podcast episode in a small group of like 3 or 4 students. And then the second one is the Monday Night Football style presentation, where essentially you'll be using kind of all the telestration tools and talking us through the performance of a selected team. So I'm really excited about that because it's so different to anything that we've done before. Yeah, so that would be my choice, but there'll be favourite elements in all the other ones.
Of course. And I think sometimes it's about taking people out of their comfort zone a little bit. I think that's really, really important, like being face-to-face, personal skills, which we pushed so much in reference to employability within football. It's not just about the qualifications. Sometimes you've got to do a little bit more than that in terms of how you interact, how you interface, how you come across an interview. How proactive are you on LinkedIn about discussing what your expert opinions are, whether it's in scouting, whether it's in recruitment, whether it's in coaching. So yeah, I think kind of being kind of different to everybody else is really, really important. And obviously, this module definitely encompasses that. I think there was one other question. Are there any prerequisites for joining the course? Good question.
There are, just like there would be any other master's programme. One thing I would definitely probably signpost you to is the UCFB website, because I don't want to get the messaging wrong in this on-the-spot question. So please have a look at the website, because all the entry requirements are on there in terms of what you'd need to be accepted onto the course. We kind of look at it on a case-by-case basis as well. So I think if there was ever a point where you thought, I don't necessarily hit the entry criteria, so it might be that you've got some of it but not all of it, I would absolutely recommend that you reach out to myself or the admissions team at UCFB just to ask some particular individual questions, because one example I always give is that if Alex Ferguson wanted to come onto one of our courses and he didn't have the prerequisites, I think we'd be a bit silly to be like, no, UCFB aren't accepting you. So it's always done on a case-by-case basis, in the sense of maybe some of your experiences are really valid, but maybe you just don't necessarily have the qualifications on paper to show that. And that's obviously where the conversation could begin.
Fantastic. And I think as you go through the application, the registration process, UCFB and obviously Jobs4Football have a fantastic relationship. There is a discount code associated to that as well. So I think on the drop-down menu, if I'm correct, Danielle, I think you can actually select Jobs4Football about where you found out more information about this course. And then Jobs4Football members would receive a discount on the course as well. So I just wanted to let you guys. That's right, isn't it, Danielle? I'm sure it is.
I think so. Yeah, it's. But if obviously you're struggling to locate that, or it's not there for any reason, please just email our admissions email team, which are on the course page, just to obviously state that you've come through Jobs4Football. You can't find obviously the link, and they'll obviously direct you to where that might be.
Fantastic. And guys, thank you so much. I'm not sure whether there's any more questions. Producer, do we have any more? Great. No, well, listen, thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you so much, Stuart. Absolute, really exciting time for UCFB. Like I say, a course that Jobs for Football completely endorse, and we look forward to seeing how it progresses over the next few months. Thank you again, Danielle. Thank you, Stuart. Hope everybody enjoyed that. And like I say, there'll be more podcasts over the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone.